going to
Okay,
do
so
is
she need,
from the beginning, that's all she has to click on is that right there.
okay,
And then she will have control.
and it'll show up on
show
the,
up.
okay.
Yeah.
It's already right here.
Oh, okay.
All you need to do is click from the beginning, and then it will pop up on
Okay.
here.
Okay.
And I'm sitting right there if you forget.
If I freak out.
Yeah, if you
Good.
forget how to read.
Okay.
So,
Great. Okay.
so that's it.
Works. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our special meeting of November 30th, 2017. As noted, tonight is a special meeting. We began this afternoon with a closed session, and Ms. Gallagher, do you have a report on the closed session?
Yes, the council gave direction to staff on both items.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms. Williams, do you want to announce the roll, please?
Let the record state that all council members are present with the exception of Councilmember Schwedhelm.
And again, because tonight's a special meeting, the public comment will be limited to the items that are listed on the agenda. We have 2 items, and we'll start with the consent calendar. Ms. Hurtado.
Consent item 6.1, resolution extension of proclamation of existence of local emergency due to fires.
And are there any questions on this, council? I do have one card. Peter Chernoff.
Is it 3 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. Susan? To the best of my ability, I've put forth a response. To the best of my ability, I've put forth a response to the 2 items. And so extinguishing controls by outside forces. Sonoma County contractors and labor be what's needed, desired, and appropriate, and would fit with the concept of Sonoma Strong. Out-of-state workers I find unacceptable. I even think of the word treason comes to mind. And to all listening, remember, it's been given that by the prophetic 40-day strike, the Santa Rosa Council, the supervisors, will then be unshackled themselves and free to serve community first and foremost. So too very true of law enforcement. So sweet, beautiful, and dutiful. For power never steps back except in the face of greater power. And I am Peter, I am keeper of the keys that brings all this corruption to its knees. California now shows America how to lead. After the 40-day strike, city, county, and state workers go to a 20-hour work week, as we have now all agreed between ourselves that all rents and mortgages will be 25% of what they were before the strike. More time for family, friends, gardens, and music, and thousands of new jobs. For extraordinary times require extraordinary measures, as we intend for our children to enjoy the promised land's treasures. An extraordinary action by almighty faction. We've been caught in a trap of the 240-year usurist banker's plan, and knowing no angel born in hell could break this Satan's spell, so therefore you will abide this almighty command. All union workers, truckers, workers in general will now unite, embracing the 40-day prophetic freedom strike to finish this fight. All who hear this missive, this moment, be off the fence. Pay no more utilities, no mortgages, no rents. For push has come to shove, and who could counter this action based on Almighty's love? Forever this world has sought to heist that which shines in our heart, that shines as the sun, with all shadows to run. Comes now the power of Christ. I say it, you hear it, so be it. This action has begun. As I've said it, it is now done.
That's the only card I have on the consent calendar, Mr. Tibbetts.
I move item 6.1 of the consent calendar and waive further reading of the text.
Second. Ms. Williams, are you taking a
Yes, I'll take a
Roll.
roll call vote. Councilmember Rogers?
Aye.
Councilmember Oliveras? Councilmember Combs?
Aye.
Councilmember Sawyer?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Tibbetts?
Aye.
And Mayor Corsi?
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to 7.1, Ms. Hurtado.
7.1, report urgency ordinance to provide for cleanup of parcels that contain fire debris and destroyed structures that are not committed to the consolidated debris removal program or to a private Santa Rosa fire cleanup application. City Attorney Sue Gallagher will be reporting.
This is the revised.
I can clarify what is, Sue Gallagher, City Attorney, clarify what is being handed out and what is, there is a stack back at the back table as well. There's one minor change to the second ordinance in your packet with respect to inspection and abatement warrants. And when we get to that point, I'll explain what that change is. And I'll have to wait for the clerk to... Oh.
And then to move it, use the, okay, great.
And Sue, I know it's a bit of a stretch, but try and speak close to that microphone.
Oh, it doesn't come over. Okay. I will try. Can folks hear me?
That's better.
As you all know, in early September, we suffered from devastating wildfires. Almost 3,000 residential units within Santa Rosa were destroyed. Soon thereafter, the Sonoma County Health Officer, and this also combined with the Sonoma County Environmental Health Officer, issued an emergency order as well as an emergency proclamation. The emergency order stated that the fire debris, declared the fire debris to be a, quote, substantial, present, or potential hazard to human health and in the environment. The order required that debris be removed. The fire debris contains very hazardous materials, toxic materials left from burned building materials, vehicles, electronics, paints, cleaning solvents, other household products, and the order required that they be cleared, transported, and disposed of in a manner that would protect the public health and that would be in compliance with all laws, both local, state, and federal. Time is critical because of risks of cross-contamination from one property to another and to threats to the general public and the environment, and those threats include transmission of toxic materials into waterways, into public infrastructure, including our water system, our wastewater system, sewer system, and stormwater systems, as well as airborne toxins. So property owners were given two different avenues for cleanup. The first is a government-sponsored program, which is known as the Consolidated Debris Removal Program. It is coordinated through both the California Office of Emergency Services and FEMA. The work itself is being performed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It is at no cost to the property owner. FEMA will cover the costs, but will take, if there is any insurance, if the property owner has any insurance that provides for debris cleanup, that portion of the insurance must be reimbursed to FEMA to cover some of their costs. The cleanups are done with the agreement of the property owner. The property owner executes and submits a right of entry that allows the Army Corps to come onto the property and clear the debris. The Army Corps' practice is to clear the properties to bare soil. So the foundation, all the ash and debris, including the home foundation, are removed. Several inches, often several inches below the foundation, is also taken out. The soil is tested to ensure that it is clean and meets all environmental standards. If property owners do not wish to go into the government-sponsored program, they may pursue a cleanup through private action. And in order to do that, if you're in the city, you have to file an application for a permit from the city's Planning and Economic Development Department. It is entitled a Santa Rosa Fire Cleanup Application and Work Plan, and the work plan has to lay out all the steps that you'll take to clear your property so that it meets the essential standards that are met in the government-sponsored consolidated debris removal program. The one exception is that within the city limits, the private avenue does not require removal of foundations at the cleanup stage. Folks should be aware that before any building permits will be issued, the foundation needs to be tested for security. As I understand it, due to the intensity of this fire, most foundations will be damaged to an extent that they cannot be reused, but there may be instances where they could. So a property owner, before getting a building permit, if you want to use any portion of your foundation, you'll have to come in with a certification from an engineer. So the private program does have city approval requirement and city oversight. The city will be monitoring to make sure that the work is done in accordance with the work plan. Unfortunately, there are some property owners that have not yet committed to clearing either through the federal or the government program or through a private cleanup action. As of earlier this week, there were about 280 properties, I should say before Thanksgiving, there were about 280 properties that fell into this category that had not yet selected an avenue for cleanup. As of yesterday, we're down to about 28 properties that fall into this universe. So the question then for us is, how do we address those parcels that are not yet into a cleanup program? I'll also say that reduction in number of properties that are in the undecided category, that reduction was really due to the great efforts of city workers and several of our council members who did the research and made phone calls to reach those undecided folks. So we've offered to the council 3 different options to address those properties that are still in the undecided category. The ordinance option number 1 is a summary abatement process. The council would declare by ordinance that the ash and fire debris is a public nuisance, and that will be mirrored. That would mirror the language from the public health officer's order and the public health officer and public environmental health officer's proclamation. Once that declaration is made, the chief building official would be delegated the authority to identify the parcels that contain fire debris but that do not have a cleanup plan. The city would use all reasonable means to give 2 weeks' notice to those properties. Again, we're down to about 28 properties at this point. We would be giving written notice by mail. We would be posting the property. We would be making phone calls trying to reach those property owners. We would be publishing that in the newspaper and any other means that we can think of to try to get the word out. After that 2-week notice period, if the city receives no objection, the city would authorize the Army Corps of Engineers to enter and clear the property. And the Army Corps would use the same standard that they've been using under the ROEs, which is that the property would be cleared entirely down to clean soil. The second option involves going to court before taking any abatement action. Again, the council would declare the ash and fire debris to be a public nuisance. The chief building official would identify the parcels that contain fire debris but that do not yet have a cleanup plan. The city would then submit an application to the Superior Court for an inspection and an abatement warrant to allow us to enter and clear the private properties. Upon issuance of that warrant, we would inspect the properties. We would again attempt to give notice to the property owner that we were about to go into the property. And we would either utilize the services of the Army Corps or private contractors to do the work to clear the property of ash and fire debris. If the work is done by the private contractors, the city will bear the initial cost of the cleanup and will then lien the property to recover those costs. It may be possible that some of those costs would be reimbursable under FEMA, and we would, of course, pursue that avenue as well. If under this second option, if the work is done by Army Corps, we anticipate that that would again mean that the property is cleared entirely, including foundations. If it is done by a private contractor, we would have more control over what the scope of that cleanup is, and we might determine to have that cleanup be only the ash and surface debris and any unstable structural elements. Obviously, I'm sorry, the Superior Court may make that choice for us as to what the scope of the work should be. The third option also involves going to court, but is a little bit different. Again, the council would declare the ash and fire debris a public nuisance, and again, the chief building official would identify the parcels that contain fire debris but have no cleanup plan. Rather than seeking inspection and abatement warrant, we would be applying to Superior Court for a court order to compel the private property owner, the owner of the property, to undertake the cleanup within a time certain. If the property owner does not clear the property, submit an application and clear the property within that time period, we would then ask the court to allow the city itself to go in and undertake the cleanup. So those are our three options that we are offering to you. They can also be combined to some extent, and we look forward to your decision and input. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gallagher. Just for the benefit of the public, because all of this involves abatement proceedings and courtroom proceedings, the council has discussed this in closed session to get a briefing and have a discussion about the legal strategies related to potential litigation around this. So you may not hear a lot of questions from the council about this in open session, but we have discussed it in closed session. With that, I'll open it up for questions from the council. Seeing none, I do have some cards. John Allen. He'll be followed by Chris Grable.
Good evening, and thank you all for your continuous efforts in trying to get our community put back together. One of the concerns that I see in regards to these cleanup procedures is safety and consistency. You know, consistency throughout the program, whether folks opt in, opt out, or you guys have to go in under an abatement program. We would like to see some consistency out there in the field. Currently, in parts of Fountain Grove, there are footings and retaining walls being removed where they should not be, thus posing a threat to our stormwater and our soil stabilization. The other concerns in regards to safety that I've seen is there is a lack of traffic control, a lack of PPE, personal protective equipment. Some contractors are adhering to the policies that were set forth in the Army Corps of Engineers. Some contractors are not. So that is a concern for those individual workers out there. You know, there's some loopholes that folks may be using, but at the end of the day, those workers have the right to return home in the same shape that they came to work in. So that is a legitimate concern for the folks out there actually doing the work. The option one that you guys have presented, it appears to be the best option, to have the Army Corps come in. However, there is some inconsistency with the Army Corps' procedures that I've seen versus what I'm looking at in Coffee Park. They're doing a nice, clean job. They're adhering to safety protocols. They're respecting people's property. In speaking with the workers, the actual folks on the excavators and bobcats, first thing out of their mouths were, why don't we just put this all into a pile and get rid of it? That's the most efficient way. Well, they realize that these are people's individual lots, and they also realize that this is personal property. You know, when the walls collapsed, they lift it up, they find a wooden jewelry box filled with the people's jewelry. If they'd done it the, efficiency way, that could have been wiped out. So I am seeing some inconsistencies out there with the current cleanup, and I would hope that that could be addressed further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Chris Grable, he'll be followed by Bob Hanson.
Good evening. Yeah, I'm going to echo pretty much everything that Mr. Allen said. I've checked every single, for instance, Ash Britt site in Fountain Grove, if we're talking about consistency, and they're all out of compliance in some form or another. And in some of those sites are out of compliance in every category of the performance work statement, which is the standard which all the contractors are supposed to be following. Now, the majority of the work that's been done in Coffee Park and in Larkfield, the majority of the sites, hands down, have been done well, and they've been done by a lot of local contractors that have been following all those protocols, using PPEs, personal protective equipment, Tyvek suits, masks. They've been lining the trucks in plastic and then wrapping them up for transport, so you're not, exposing us to air quality hazards. There's a long list of things. I can send you the performance work statement if you'd like. My main issue as well is, as we go forward, whatever you decide, option one does seem to be the best and the quickest, is really pushing the enforcement of these standards. It's one thing to say, oh, everybody's supposed to be complying. Well, we all know that, but we really need to focus on resources for enforcement, and the enforcement needs to be adequate to be a deterrent, right? Because a lot of big companies will write this into their bottom line, fines, whatever it is, they become part of their operating costs. And we have to make sure that there is an adequate deterrent to really bring people into compliance and give the property owners what was promised after we spent so much time getting them to opt in. And really, they've put their trust in public officials, people in public office, in the Army Corps. We really have to deliver and honor our promise. And I think enforcement is going to be a big component of that.
Thank you. Bob Hanson will be followed by Brittany Perkins.
Evening, everybody. This is nice. Started the fire. First 2 days, the public was being addressed by our mayor, Mr. Corsi. By the 5th day, he was in the 5th row with a look on his face like, who are all these people around me? This out of state, out of country crew you're bringing in, America Veritas. I was still working residential in Petaluma when they started their construction boom, brought all these crews in from out of state, New Mexico, Texas. Crews not qualified to do the work they were doing. I hope our city residents, our families who are facing rebuilding, trust in themselves, in their insurance agents, hopefully they have a good one, and in our local construction, our local contractors, our local construction crews. We've gone through disasters before, fires of '64, the '06 quake and fires, and we got through it without bringing in outside construction crews. You approve contractors to bring them in and house them on site. We're not even doing that for our homeless community, yet we're doing it for outside construction crews. This is a chance for our city to solve two problems at once: the disaster, the fire disasters, and helping our homeless community. We just signed a $1.5 million contract with Nelson. Let's put the word out to anybody in our community who wants to go to work. The jobs are there available. Let's solve this locally. This is a local problem. It's not a problem, it's a disaster. But trusting in outside construction crews, which are not construction crews. Petaluma, 10 years ago, contractor bought a bunch of guys off the street, set of nail bags, and then called them and billed them as carpenters, plumbers, electricians, tapers, and they weren't. It took a couple of years for them to get the experience, and now this Latino construction crew has control of our commercial building in our county. That's fine. Welcome. But you've opened the door for another wave of outside construction that's not qualified to build in our county. Let's take care of this locally. And let's put the people in our city who need to go to work, give them the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Brittany Perkins.
Hello, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, City staff, public. Brittany Perkins, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Ashburn Environmental, one of the contractors the United States Army Corps of Engineers has working in Sonoma County. So I wanted to first say this is my first time meeting any elected officials in the city and the county. So it's an honor to be here serving you during this difficult time. We take that with the utmost seriousness and respect to the community in which we're working. And myself and the company believes local economic recovery and being part of the recovery process through contracting is key to economic success. It's also key to morale and mental recovery for your community. So I wanted to address, I guess, first 2 points that I think is critical for the City Council to be aware of. Ashbrit and the other contractor are working under two slightly different scopes of work. So I think it's important, and it's very confusing, I am certain, for the public when they're saying scope of works are different. It's critical. I have not seen a copy of their contract, but I've been made aware from the Corps that there's variances between the two contractors. So just a key to note, there's hundreds of people working on the storm. That's a critical first piece. I also want to address safety. Safety is the key component of any of Ashbrit's operations. And just today, I wrote down the name, Mr. Lee, who is a senior safety engineer for Cal OSHA, called our senior safety officer and said Ashbrit is in full compliance with California laws. The Army Corps of Engineers, key safety members and leadership have also echoed that our safety program is on spot and on par with all state, federal, city, and local laws. Ashbrit Environmental celebrated our 25-year anniversary just 2.5 weeks ago. We're very proud. Our first contract was as a subcontractor on an Army Corps job. 25 years later, to be a prime contractor serving your community is a true honor. Ashbrit Environmental, after the Army Corps of Engineer contracting process, is arguably the gold standard of contracting. It's an incredibly competitive procurement process with small privately held companies through billion-dollar international companies. And time and again, Ashbrit has been selected as the prime contractor for two of the United States' most populous regions and regions most prone to disasters. That's the South Pacific Division, which encompasses California, and the South Atlantic Division, which is Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama. So I want to reiterate, the gold standard of procurement has time and again selected Ashbrit as the prime, #1 contractor for these critical regions prone to disasters. So again, I wanted to reiterate, we're here serving your community. We're doing it in the most safe, efficient manner, and I wanted to take this opportunity tonight to introduce myself. 2 more quick comments. This is the first time myself or any of my team members on the ground have had interface with local or county elected officials out of respect to direction from the Corps. So we are not working any politics, although I'm happy to be a resource available to your team. The second item to add is we have 91% State of California hiring in our crews. Only 2 debris crews, I'll
Ms.
say 3
Ms.
to
Perkins,
Marjorie,
I
are
need you to wrap
outside
up,
of
please.
California. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, while Ms. Perkins is here, if I could get some clarity on a couple of questions?
I don't think you can do that at this point. This isn't a back and forth, and I tell that to the public all the time, Mr. Rogers, so I'm going to tell it to you as well.
Okay, well, after public comment, if I could, if you'd stick around, I have a couple of questions related to this that you may be able to answer for us.
I'm happy to be a resource for the community. Thank you.
Mr. DeWitt.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Santa Rosa. As a member of the community, I would like to see that this fine firm that's just been hired do as much subcontracting with local Santa Rosa people as possible. There is an opportunity through federal funding that you could actually even be doing some training during this time. The Environmental Protection Agency has resources to train people in different types of activities. This happens with brownfields cleanups. We used to have a project here in Santa Rosa called Youth Build, while Mayor, I think at the time, well, we won't go there. It's a mayor long in the past, 20 years ago. But the idea still lives, and the idea that we could have some of this work done by our local people could be more helpful than these folks may know. There's a lot of able-bodied young people who are members of are homeless right now. I see them frequently. And I think to myself, how about we get them involved in this? We should thank Mr. Grable and the others that have been doing the volunteering to help on the environmental protection of our waterways. We're in a county that has billionaires. We got lots of money here. You'd think those folks would be covering some of this instead of volunteers having to go out and get things in order. So there needs to be a bit more of the word they use is comprehensive and cohesive approach to getting not just our cleanup done, but the soul of our community back in the thrive mode. That yes, we're working together to deal with this, and that these young people who could be helped will get this opportunity right here, right now. One of the things I was most struck by when I read the news stories after the fire is that everybody was so concerned that we make sure and take care of undocumented, that those workers were going to be so needed. And I thought, yeah, well, how about our teenagers too? How about those people that are out there right now just struggling to get by? Many of them are now living in my neighborhood, right over there at Roseland Village. There's, a lot of folks that could put their basic able body to use for us to make our community even better. So I ask you to look outside of the box, to do new approaches. I've heard a lot of people say that's going to happen. Well, proof is in the pudding. Now's the time. That lady said her firm got started by doing subcontracting. So there you go. They should be looking for Santa Rosa-based people to do Santa Rosa cleanup to make it a better spot. And if you get some extras, send them over to Roseland because we need them there too. Thank you so much for your time.
That's all the cards I have. Mr. Rogers, if you have some questions that are related to this item.
Yes, they are absolutely related to this item, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
All right, Ms. Perkins, if you would. Thank you so much for being here and being willing to shed some clarity for me. One of the things that I'm struggling with in choosing which direction to go is obviously whether or not the work will be done through the Army Corps of Engineers or by a private contractor. And for me, one of the really important issues is around the worker safety. So I was out today and did see most of the workers did not have PPEs, personal protective equipment, on them. Can you clarify for us whether or not your workers are required to wear PPEs and follow the same Cal Recycle environmental cleanup standards, including using wattles and using burrito wraps, that the ECC was prior using in these areas as well?
Absolutely. My company is following all requisite state, federal, I'm going to get more detailed, but I will say we are following all laws per our contract unequivocally following all laws as per my contract with the Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers, echoed today by Cal OSHA, is that the level 4 PPE, which is level D, I believe, is what is required on the job until environmental conditions dictate level C PPE. We have companies, most of our companies are ready to go for level C PPE. So to your point, and reiterate if I missed it, Ashbrook is following all state and federal environmental regulations that are required. We're having wattles, we're burrito wrapping all ash and soil. Recycled concrete does not have to be burrito wrapped, but all materials that are required to be burrito wrapped are being burrito wrapped. All public safety items are being worn. And to the point made earlier, we are happy to work with any local organizations that are doing safety training or hazardous material training. If there's ways we can partner with that to bring folks on, we've been doing that with the union halls, bringing their team members on. If there's other organizations, I'm happy to be the direct contact for the city and work with those safety programs and employment programs. I will quickly add, and then I'll...
Ms. Perkins, I'd like you to please restrict your answers to the question that's being asked, please.
I was an attorney. I can do the yes-nos.
So if we go the route where we are using the Army Corps of Engineers and it's being done through your organization, the workers will be required to wear the PPEs. That's what I heard.
Yes.
And they'll be required to be HAZWOPER certified.
As required by my contract.
So were
To
you
the
throwing-
extent my contract requires me to have certified workers at any level, I will follow my contract to a T.
Okay, so your contract, because you did mention you have a different scope of work.
My
than what was with
understanding is the
ECC.
scopes of work are different, which is arguably causing confusion among the public.
And so I get that you're an attorney.
Not acting as one right now.
Where you're throwing in at the end, as per my contract, what I'd like to know is, does your contract require the wearing of PPEs?
Yes.
And HAZWOPER training?
It requires the wearing of PPE, and HAZWOPER training is on a determinative basis for the environmental conditions that exist at the time.
Okay.
I'm not trying to legal answer, and my role here as a contractor is to follow the contract I'm operating under.
Right. To help me understand a little bit better, at what point do you envision that the environmental standards will drop to the point where your workers will not be required to have those? And I ask because as we're shifting over on this contract, today that could be the requirement. Tomorrow, as soon as you start off,
The environmental conditions could change, and my
Correct.
crews will be immediately in the level of PPE required by the conditions. I would say, and I'm not trying to be difficult, I am not our senior safety officer nor the Corps. My understanding is there's meetings tomorrow. We have daily and weekly safety meetings as a company and with the Corps of Engineers. I believe tomorrow there's even state, potentially local officials. I would direct concerns about what the contract should or should not require to the contracting bodies, because I'm telling you, I will follow what my contract says.
okay, I think that that's fair. Yes, that meeting, we have heard about that. You did mention that you were looking to hire local individuals that were previously, as I understand it, employed by ECC under their previous contract, and you're absorbing the work. Those same local workers, and by local I don't mean California, I mean Northern California in our region. Your commitment is that you will be looking to bring those individuals on as well?
So yes, my commitment, just, I think the numbers speak for themselves. We have, out of our 143 California contractors, 104 are from the declared impacted counties. So, and I think that's a very strong number, and we've only been here 3 weeks. So we're really ramping up. We were asked to double our operations on Sunday. So those are great numbers for the first 3 weeks, and my commitment to you is they're going to grow stronger if that's the baseline. So Mike, and I would like to add, we have a partnership already with Santa Rosa Junior College. Some of the concerns from the audience were young workers. If there's a youth build or other employment opportunities through the youth, through the schools, through the adult communities, homeless communities, please pass them our way. We have an intern already with the junior college starting tomorrow. I think another one starting next week. So we hit the ground running to be a good corporate local partner in the community.
Right, and I really appreciate that. And I do know today there were 90 qualified workers through the operating engineers who did not have a place to go as work was ramped down. and I understand it'll ramp back up. I would encourage you to be talking with them as they
Chris
have.
calls me every day and we talk.
Excellent. I'll be really excited to get your card so that I can do the same to make sure that we're on the same page in that.
The union was the first personal meeting I took in Sonoma County. I had a meeting yesterday with them. I have a phone call next week with my national equipment dealer because operators are one part. We have to have equipment for them to operate on. Half of my crews right now are union crews. And I have no requirement to hire a certain percentage, let me be clear. And I met with them yesterday. I have a call with an equipment dealer next week to see how we can try to make the partnership work to serve the employment sector in the county.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Council, are there further questions?
And if I may,
Yes,
before
Ms.
we move
Gallagher.
on to other questions, I don't have any questions for you. But
Thank you.
I just want to kind of clarify that exchange, that to the extent that that was information to help you decide which option and how to shape that option, that's what that conversation was. And so I just want to make it clear that was not an opportunity, that was not intended as a general discussion of your current practices, except as to they may inform your decision. Great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there questions from the council? Mr. Rogers, you have this item, I believe.
And before we start, before we start into the next phase, I just want to clarify, I have handed out a revised ordinance for option 2, and the revision is on page 7 of 8. It is simply the addition of one phrase to clarify that under this particular ordinance, the city would not go into a property to abate the fire debris except in compliance with the inspection and abatement warrant issued pursuant to the ordinance. So that's what that clarification is in red line. There are copies at the back table, and again, it's on page 7 of 8. Simply a clarification.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
All right, so I'm looking at the red line version of option 2. I will move the ordinance of the council, the urgency ordinance of the City Council of Santa Rosa declaring fire debris and destroyed structures on parcels in the city that are not subject to the Consolidated Debris Removal Program or to a Santa Rosa fire cleanup application and work plan to be a public nuisance, delegating to the chief building official the authority to identify such parcels in the city and delegate authority to the chief building official to apply to the Superior Court for an inspection and abatement warrant and, upon issuance, to inspect and abate the public nuisance on those parcels and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Before we vote, I just want to note that, as Ms. Gallagher noted earlier, city staff has gone out of their way to contact people who weren't signed up for one of the other debris removal programs. We have a little more than 24 people left. We could go with option number 1, which basically sends out a notice to people we haven't been able to contact yet, for the most part, and go in and clean up their properties. Out of, I think, an abundance of caution and a care for members of our community who have been displaced, we're going to take that a step further and go to court with this. And that's the intent here. We want to get our community cleaned up as quickly as we can, but also with some care and compassion for the folks who've lost their homes. And with that, I invite in any comments for other council members before we vote. Ms. Williams.
Okay, Councilmember Rogers.
Aye.
Councilmember Oliveras.
Aye.
Councilmember Combs.
Yes.
Councilmember Sawyer.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Tibbetts. Mayor Corsi.
Aye.
That passes with 6 ayes.
With that, we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.